workshop to order. And first thing is county administrator comments.
Acting Honorable Chairman and members of the board, this is a continuation workshop from a prior workshop that we had back in February to address land development code and comprehensive plan amendments, adjustments, policy tweaks, etc. that we held back in February. This evening, Ms. Margaret Embledge is going to take you through those various documents and let you know where we're at, what's the matter of priority, how we're going to eat this elephant one bite at a time, and kind of give you an outlook of where we're headed. So with that, I will yield the floor to Margaret Embledge, the Planning and Community Development Director.
All right.
Good evening, Commissioners. Is this on?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. I really don't want to have to hold this. Let me do this. Let me see if you can hear me. Well, as Mr. Chapman mentioned, we presented the list of land development code and comprehensive plan issues that we have experienced, staff has in implementing our codes. And we also had presented the amendments that we have accomplished the year before. What I have before you today are staff's recommendations on what we see are priorities to pursuing amendments to the Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Code. And what I'd like to do is to walk through what I have listed and get board direction on staff's recommendation, and if you have anything additional that you want to add or something that you don't think is a priority, we can note that as well. And if you have any other questions, we can go there as well. But if the board is in agreement, I'll just walk through each one of these that I have listed and get your input as we go through.
Okay, please do.
The first item is under the comprehensive plan amendments, and what I see as one of our biggest priorities is that we need to revise our future land use categories, because the way they're written, each one of them are written a little differently. They aren't very clear on what types of uses are permitted in those land use categories, and and in addition to that, they also in some ways don't match some of our zoning districts, what the uses are there, and they're not necessarily, they don't have to match, but they create confusion. And we also, what I'd like to do is look at the opportunity of maybe renaming them so that they reflect really what we want the area to be, whether it's more of an area that should accommodate mixed use as opposed to the land use categories that refer to just a medium residential density area. Some of those areas that are designated like that, just as an example, it may be appropriate to allow some type of neighborhood commercial in certain areas, but at the same time you would establish locational standards for that commercial so that it's not disruptive to the residential uses in the area. But and those are the types of things that you'll find in other comprehensive plans, is how they look at allowing those types of uses that will accommodate this, provide the services to the residences in that particular area. So those are some of the things that we'd like to look at. Do you have any questions on that?
I do not. I applaud you for that. It's much needed. Yes, sir.
Can we also, adverse to that, be proactive in saying we don't want commercial uses to be in a particular,
Absolutely.
So
yes.
I mean, and what do you think from a timeline? When would you like to start having that type of a conversation? Case in point, in the entire time that I've been elected, we've had 2 or 3 issues that have come up in the Pioneer and Ladika community. How would we go about just designating, taking the map, putting it on the wall, having a public forum, public workshop at their community meeting, and then allowing it to come up to our level and saying, okay, we're going to designate this entire area as rural residential or whatever it may be, and then it's case closed for there in perpetuity, unless someone wants to step through the process of a special exception. They would never be able to just designate a commercial operation. And code enforcement would have the teeth that immediately that they receive the complaint that this type of activity is occurring, wham, they can go out there and put the screws in.
Right, well, how you describe what you'd like to go through on this is exactly what we'd have to do.
Okay.
Is to have individual community meetings, and we would have to create drafts of proposed language and designations and provide that to have public forums that folks can come in and review what we're proposing, provide input, and it would eventually make its way up through the public hearing process. But before that, we would need to have community input so that we're going in the direction that we're never going to get consensus, but what the majority would like to go towards.
Absolutely. And I know that in some of the rural residential areas that I represent, we've done a disservice by not having this in place now. We've got residences having to live that commercial operations have moved next to. And it's terrible what they're having to put up with.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Are we gonna make a decision on what would go in if we wanted to let somebody with commercial go in? Or would that come after listening to the public hearing and comments?
Well, initially, staff and whether we work with a consultant or not at this point for this, we would come up with some options of what we would recommend, and then we would put them out for the community and to get their input, and then again it would come through the process. So we would be able to determine at the end of the day what would make sense on whether it's type of a mixed use area and what would go there. And as I just mentioned, is that there are some of these amendments that may require some additional assistance from consultants, and so staff would be looking for not only a budget line item for consultant fees, but also we'd be looking for opportunities for grants as well to provide to get the help that we need. And there are some of these that we can do on our own. It just depends on how many priorities we have and what the expectations are as far as time frames and such. So the next item is regarding mobile homes, and we may have mentioned before that there's case law that basically restricts us from restricting mobile homes where any residential use is permitted. I don't know if I said that right, but we basically need to address that case law in our comprehensive plan future land use categories and in our zoning categories. And I look at that as a priority and something that can occur along with the future land use category rewrites as well. But we have right now, as I previously had mentioned, that we have some areas that specifically prohibit mobile homes, and that's contrary to the case law that we came across.
So are you saying where there's houses and there's an empty lot, you could put a mobile home in there?
The case law suggests that yes, if you allow residential use, that would include a mobile home.
Okay, what would you have to do to change that?
Well,
Can that be changed?
Yes, there's a way to address it, and some other jurisdictions have done so through required design regulations. And some of those design restrictions, I should say, would be something like a certain pitch in a roof, whether you'd have to have a porch or a carport, and what your foundation would have to be, and those are the basics. So it's not hard to come up with those, suggestions or recommendations.
Because wherever you put that mobile, then automatically, if somebody else wants to go down the road and put in one, then they just.
Oh, it'll proliferate, yes, I
just
understand, and
start
that's,
popping everything.
and right now, though, our code is very restrictive on where mobile homes can go. And so we need to work through that as well. So that is, to me, one of our higher priorities as well.
Yes, sir.
As it relates to that very subject, could you give us some solid examples and use Heartland counties, and then if you'd like to use some of the bigger ones, that's okay as well, but an example so that we can see it on a spreadsheet of what it costs to permit a manufactured home, a trailer, and then a single-family home, square footage comparison thereof. And I'm really thinking, like, if you're putting a trailer up in Loxahatchee in the acreage in Palm Beach County, or you're putting one up in Golden Gate Estates in Collier County, and then you're doing the same thing with a single-family home, how does that compare if you were doing a single-family home in Montura and the permitting costs associated with it, and the number of inspections at every level versus a trailer? And what I'm overall, my goal here is this: how conducive is our environment in Hendry County to encouraging people to do a single-family home versus a trailer, and looking at all the checks and balances and the different levels of inspection that you have to go through, and the cost, and how prohibitive that is for one or the other. Please.
Okay, we can do that.
And I'd love to have the whole board be able to review that percentage, please.
Okay.
And just so you know, I mean, my goal at the end of this, after we see the data, is going to be able to hopefully adjust our schedule so that we're making it more conducive to encourage a single-family home. I'm seeing a tremendous amount of growth occurring right now in Pioneer and Latika. A lot of foundations are going in. That's going to turn into more MSBU dollars and more roads that we're going to have a requirement to be met. But I'm seeing the trailer and no site built homes. It's all prefabbed.
Mm-hmm.
And as y'all have heard me say many times, that depreciates quickly. And now the dollars associated with what it takes for when that person wants services rendered, it doesn't amount to what the coverage is.
Could you add that piece of what you just said to your request, where I would love to see the depreciation time frame of what it looks like on that?
I think that I don't know if our staff can do that. If they could, that would be wonderful.
For an average, I mean, it doesn't.
Yes, sir.
One,
I think that the property appraiser's office could definitely do
Sure,
that.
we can work with them to get some
Okay.
numbers for you.
It's just like a car.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Sure.
And you bottom line on your tax rates where that
Right.
affects
Quickly.
quickly.
Okay. Anything else on that item? Okay.
No, ma'am.
The next item is something that I know that has been talked about for a while here, is that we want to establish target industries, and at one point in time we had a revised economic development element, and that was challenged, and so we still have what we had, I think, in 2009 or something like that, but it needs to be addressed, not just in the element itself, but also we need to get concurrence with the board on what our targeted industries are and where we want them to go, so that we can get ahead of things, in that, for example, if you get a company that comes in that wants to do certain types of experimentations and such, you might want to have them in an industrial area as opposed to allowing them in an agricultural area. So
You can do that.
So I just thought it was important that we would, confirm the direction that the county wants to go with, where these types of uses should be,
I'd love to see a plan for smart growth.
yeah.
Then it could always be changed, right?
Yes, as long as we go through the public hearing process and,
I venture to say today that we're so hungry for growth that we got our arms open. If they'll come, we'll take them, and we'll give them a spot, but there needs to be some, planning.
exactly, just be careful what you ask for
That's
type
right,
thing.
exactly.
And we want it to be appropriate, and, like you said, well-planned,
Right.
so, okay.
I need to be beneficial for the area. Like you said, we're so hungry for growth now, we're bending over backwards to bring them in and give them everything we can to get them here. The reality is, it's bit us in the hind end a couple of times, so we need to make sure we're bringing in good, positive industry to the area.
Yep, I agree.
The next item under the comprehensive plan amendments has to do with RVs, and this also not only has to do with RVs, but we also have had requests for what folks are referring to as tiny homes that are actually typically on an RV chassis type, on wheels. We have folks that have asked where they can place them, and right now, nowhere except for in an area that you would have to go through several processes to establish an RV park. And unless you're going to develop a very large park, it really wouldn't be, to me, economically feasible to pursue that. And so at this point, I really think that we need to, again, figure out where it would be appropriate for RVs to be located, and that, as far as we know, doesn't have case law on it that qualifies it as anything else, but a travel trailer type thing. And but also we do need to address the tiny home situation, because not only do we have the tiny homes that are on wheels, but there are tiny homes that are site built, and I personally think that would be something that we could embrace, especially if it was part of a planned development and there was a cluster of tiny homes that were site-built homes. But I think it'd be more appropriate if it was a planned development area, and not allowed next to Commissioner Harris's home up there on County Road 78, where you have large properties or large homes and so on, that having a tiny home next to them just isn't, I think, conducive to values and such. So I don't know if you're familiar with the tiny home trends that are going, but they also could become an affordable home option. And there are some developers that are looking at developing those types of small planned communities, and I think that if we come up with something that we think could work, it would open our doors to something like that as well. But right now, our code, we do have a minimum square footage for residential, site-built residential, and I think it's like 600 square feet, and where the mobile home is 500 square feet. And so 600 square feet is still larger than most of these tiny homes, and so that would be something that I think that we should consider. But at this point, I don't know if it's a priority. I'm not going to say that it's a priority for staff, but it's something that we get calls on enough that we put it on here for the board to understand that there are people looking to locate here and have RVs.
Really? So you're getting calls on now?
Yes.
So the one with wheels would be different.
Yeah, I think that the tiny homes on wheels, well, it's a tough call. I mean, if you are developing a planned development that it's all the same type of product, and you've got perimeter buffering around it, and it's not like it's lined up along the State Road 80, it could be it could work, and it could be a development that you could buffer it, locate it so that it's compatible with adjacent properties. But you've got to get those regulations in place so that we're able to do that. So that one, I think would take a little more work on our part in looking at other areas in the country that do allow them. But again, they're usually planned developments, and we can recommend certain conditions so that they would fit in.
While you're doing it, I see no reason to leave it out.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir.
So currently, right now, in like some of the outlying areas that we have, it is illegal, is it not, to park an RV on your 2.5 or 5 acre plot?
Yes.
And can you legally get a service hooked up? An electrical service? Is that, can you get a drop and all that?
You can, well, the RVs are prohibited, period. The only time
For permanent residents.
right, the only time we allow RVs is when somebody's building a home, and they actually have the permit and they're in progress. And, you know, for various reasons, they want to be on site, which I think we all can understand, especially if you're in the hinterlands and you want to protect your investment. We do allow that. But outside of that, RVs have only been permitted in RV parks. We do get a lot of folks that try to sneak them in there.
And they do. We have a lot.
Yeah.
They're getting an ag service. They're saying, I got horses, whatever. I need a service so they can have a light and a well.
Right.
Next thing you know, there's the RV. Well, we're only here on weekends.
Yeah, and that's still not permitted.
They're not supposed to stay in it at all.
Right, they're not, RVs are not allowed. They can't stay in their TED shed either. So, none of
Listen,
that.
how do you, and I don't know if we've had to deal with it yet, but how do you differentiate between an RV and a tiny structure?
Well, it would depend on the construction. And the tiny structure, again, you can have them on the wheels, or you can have them site built. So the ones on wheels, if I don't know a lot about them, but what I understand
You watch
is,
HGTV, there's an entire.
I know, I watch it.
They're neat too.
I do, I watch it, yeah. And not allowed to, you don't have to clean that much, and it's great. But the ones on,
It was called college.
what?
I lived in a closet, it was called college.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
done with those days.
Yeah, right. But I think that the ones that are on wheels are actually, they have to be considered and categorized as an RV would be.
You would think there'd be an RV.
Yeah, right. And, yeah, we just got a phone call that somebody wants to put one out in Wheeler Estates.
Because it's gonna turn into that. It's gonna turn into, we're gonna have people saying, well, this isn't my RV, this is my bus that I've customized,
Yeah.
all that. And I don't know how we hit all those check boxes,
Well, what you do is you require site built. And, and you can get you go a little further out, we've got, you can look at modulars as long as they have that stem wall and structure that, so it's like a site-built home, it's just,
But they're
prefab.
plug and play. Okay.
So are we doing anything about it, the RVs that's where they're not supposed to be?
Yes, we are.
Site.
When we get complaints in, when code enforcement sees them, we do go and send letters to the property owners, or they'll stop sometimes if they see them. A lot of times when they go out on their weekend sweeps, they'll run across the folks that are out there, and they literally will stop and tell them that they're not allowed to be there, and that they need to move, and then they'll go back an hour later and see if they're still there and have to talk to them again. But
Do we have a sufficient place here in our county to store RVs?
To store,
Well,
for them to.
To be, if they can't be on their resident,
yeah,
Well, we're not
Okay.
talking about just storing it.
Yeah, you just can't
Yeah.
live in it.
just.
Living in it only.
But they can
yeah,
park them?
yeah. I'm sorry, we need to clarify that. Yeah, you can park them if you have a site-built home. You can park your RV on the side there, but it's not meant to be a living, unit.
That's when they run the line in, plug it in.
Well, if I don't know if you know this, but an RV, there's a lot of times you're gonna plug it in and open it up so that it stays fresh and it's open and you're getting it ready for your weekend that you're going out. I mean, there are reasons to plug it in that aren't because Uncle Joe is staying in there.
I'm very glad to hear you say that, because that's being logical and not overbearing, and you're exactly right. I mean, you can't just hop in that thing one day and
Right.
everything's going to be operable.
Right.
You know,
Just like a boat.
yep, it's worse.
Yeah.
I think you're on the right path.
Okay.
I think you're on the right path.
Okay. All right, the next items are under the Land Development Code amendments that they're starting off with some amendments that we absolutely have to process. And the first one is the airport zoning regulations that we have to revise per the legislative changes that occurred, was it last year, Mark, or the year before? 16. And then that's something that we have in progress. Shane and his folks we're working with
Is it
them.
specific to either airport or just something that affects both?
It would affect both.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about private strips?
I don't know. Oh, no.
Well, not, it's only for public.
No,
service.
it's only for,
Okay.
yes, municipal airports. And so that's something that we have to do in the next couple of months. Following that is the medical marijuana dispensaries regulations that, the board recommended that we establish regulations within 9 months after your approval, which was a couple months ago. So that's something that we have to do shortly. The next item is one that will really help staff with implementing our regulations, and that's to clarify what's a principal use versus an accessory use. And that goes back to part of the discussion of whether, for example, I'll use Montour. Montour is rural residential farm. Well, from a planner's perspective, when I hear something is rural residential, when I hear residential, I think of that as the primary use that was intended. And that the other uses that for Montour specifically, and if I understand this correctly, the farm part of it kind of goes to the commercial ag that's permitted. It's a permitted use. And but we have situations where folks think that they're able to have farm animals without the residents being there. And in my opinion, if you're a commercial ag operation, bona fide commercial ag, then you don't have to have a home there. But if you're not, then I think, in my opinion, it's meant to be a residence is the primary use.
Shouldn't be a commercial ag livestock anyway, right? In the RR category?
Well, RRF in Montura
It
allows
allows the
commercial ag, and that was something that was decided a while ago, and which is part of our challenges in some of the code issues there, and animal care as well, some of those issues. But I'm not just picking on Montura, I was just using
That's
that
right.
as
We have
an
multiple
example.
of those. That's right. Sure.
And so and that's a fairly easy fix to do, so that it's cleared up for both staff and the public when they read the code. And then the next item is kind of what I was just talking about, that we want to create clear regulations on what is commercial agricultural uses versus what is household farm type situation. And that just covers all the issues that we've talked about with Montour, Pioneer and Wheeler, just to name a few, that where there's some confusion on what is commercial and what is meant for just the household. And the other part of this is looking for, and this is on number 6, is that my recommendation is that we establish locational standards for commercial uses in residential areas, like Ladika would be a good example, because of the case that we had not too long ago regarding the slaughterhouse. If we have established locational standards for even the fish farms or such, but activities that require large trucks coming in and out, and you know, that basically that kind of activity, you would want to have those located either at an intersection or
Non-invasive to a home.
pardon me?
Somewhere where it's non-invasive to a home.
Exactly, exactly. And I know that we have some restrictions with the Right to Farm Act on certain things, but we still have we have the opportunity to address traffic, and they're as simple as what, you know, Shane and I have seen is that, you know, the big trucks going over these culverts that aren't built for big trucks, they're for residential vehicles and such, but also the water management system and addressing any of the potential runoff, especially, and this is in residential areas. I'm not talking about the other large ag operations and such. Do you have any questions on that?
When you get into pets, what's the limit on pets? You know, she has 10 billy goats, but they're all pets, and stuff like that. We've run into that before.
We
Right.
put a lot.
Yeah, where she has 3 cows and they're pets. They sell it, but they sell the goats, eventually they sell the goats, you know, down to 3 goats.
Right, well, that's why we want to differentiate between household farm animals and commercial, and right now we have a table that restricts the number per acres that you can have of certain types of animals. That needs to be fixed, but it's the same concept that I would try to hold on to, is to have the number per acres, so that would be addressed from there. So that you wouldn't have that situation. How many goats?
10 pet goats.
Okay. This next one, number 7, to me, this is a big priority. And I actually have a consultant putting together a proposal to provide a access management study for, we're going to focus on State Road 80 west of LaBelle because of all the commercial rezonings that we've had.
This is a big issue because you see all the growth that is occurring.
Exactly, and if we continue, what we want to address is all of the driveway cuts and the 2-acre commercial parcels that, and quite honestly, a lot of them are turning into trucking and more, I'll say, light industrial type uses. And
are we receiving any complaints? Or is that corridor good with this activity?
well, that's a good question. I've not received complaints.
They're not good with, you got a mailbox every 15 feet on 80 and everybody's driving 70 miles an hour. You gotta get off the road like this.
Well, it is dangerous, yeah.
It's real dangerous.
So-
And, but once you let them do that, how you gonna go back and make them build a road behind it?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily have to be behind it. In some
gotta-
situations, we
You
would
gotta
look
have a
at,
road somewhere to get off.
right.
I'm
Well,
confused.
Could be a turn
Well,
lane, a wide lane.
Well, let me just say, we have to start somewhere, and we have to
Yeah.
come up with addressing that, not just in that area. What I was thinking that we should do is complete the study on that section of State Road 80. You come up with some certain design locational standards and minimum parcel standards that we then can transfer to the rest of State Road 80 and even 29.
Or anywhere.
Yes.
But there wouldn't be no way to correct what we got now.
Hey,
Well-
I think you're forgetting, we've got an engineer of the year that works for us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, where'd he go? Oh, there you are.
Is
Yeah.
is that a DOT deal? Or
Well, the DOT approves their driveway access location, but their separate, the driveway separation for them is 660 there, and that's not happening, and I think part of the reason why we're getting these, the driveways are just because they were there already. And so from a land use perspective, the county can require that they have interconnections between the properties and have either a frontage road or some type of just interconnection, whether and it's not that easy, but it's been done in so many places and it makes such a difference. And again, because it's such a, to me, a high growth area that I think that's a priority.
I agree with you.
I think that's a smart template to use everywhere as we see growth in
Mhm.
Lewiston area, if something occurs,
Right.
through Everglades, up and down the 27 corridor or anywhere else.
Okay. This next one is something that we have received comments from a number of residents, and I personally have witnessed that this is an issue. When we have, we'll just use even Pioneer and Montura and Wheeler, that folks buy a piece of property and they go in and they clear cut it. Everything goes down, and one is that you would hope that they wouldn't take down all the trees, and if there was a native tree in the right location, not in their buildable area, that they would preserve it. And the other part of it is recommending or requiring them to have silt fencing around their property, because when they clear and they have the raw land sitting there and it rains and it sloughs off onto adjacent properties, that folks have spent a lot of money on their lawn, and they're impacting them. And that's a practice that's used everywhere else, that you have to put up silt fencing when you're doing development, and there are tree protection ordinances around. I'm not suggesting going crazy, but I'm suggesting that that we should look at requiring them to preserve native trees that, again, are outside of the buildable footprint.
Yeah, that makes sense.
As long as it's not in the buildable footprint.
Right.
And we don't want to, and kind of like what Commissioner Turner said about thank you for being forward-thinking, like with the RVs being plugged in.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to be prohibitive to someone building a building or what their footprint needs to be, in lieu of saving a myrtle bush or something.
Right. Well, we wouldn't do a myrtle bush.
Yeah, just and throw one in there.
Well, Mr. Chair, I for one, I hate landscaping. I despise it. If it were up to me, I would buy field turf, and that's what my yard would consist of. I don't like trees, and I don't like leaves on my vehicles or in my boat.
Mm-hmm.
And the silt fence, that's like my biggest pet peeve on the planet, because I see the millions of dollars that the Florida Department of Transportation requires contractors to spend on silt barriers throughout, or silk barriers, as they're often referred to when referenced to me. And it's another big pet peeve of mine, but I digress. So I need to see more on this one. And I also, not to be critical, but we already are, from what I'm told, understaffed to be able to meet the requirements that are demanding of us right now. And now if we had a developer that was coming in, and let's say they're buying, let's say they buy 5 lots times 2.5 in Pioneer, who would be the actual person that would be responsible for going out there and tagging off said tree. And I mean, it hurts my heart to the core when I see a mature pine tree that's older than any of us in this room.
Right.
And it gets, just knocked over, pushed to a pile, and burned. And then you see the next real estate sign that goes in there.
Mm-hmm.
But within reason, I mean, how do you foresee that happening and happening smoothly?
Well, you bring up a very, very good point. It would become, it would require more staff time to be able to do that properly, to be able to monitor it and inspect what's been done, and again, it's just more staff time. It's just one of those situations that I still think it's a priority, but if we were to pursue it, we'd have to come up with an answer to that.
Yes, ma'am.
There would be some costs associated with it.
And I'd love to, before we jumped into that one, silt fence and telling you have to, give us a site plan, so to speak, of what trees, mature trees you're going to take out. I would love to not have any complaints for a year or so, to where you all, which you do a great job of your turnaround, are, you've got all of the fences that are permitted properly, and we're being proactive on code enforcement, and we've got kind of a lot more ducks in a row, so to speak, and then we can get, aggressive on just one. That's, of all the things that we've talked about, this is the only one that I have a little bit of concern with, because it just seems to me as it's getting dangerously close, Ms. Emblich, to it's a wonderful idea in a utopian world where we had humans that were sitting behind a desk and we could sit them up and do stuff.
Right.
You and I both know that's not where we exist in Henry County, unfortunately. Right. And I think we can sometimes create a rule or regulation or ordinance, and we never really have the ability to enforce it.
Absolutely. Yep, I agree with that.
And there has to be some common sense government too. If it's a silt fence next to a cow pasture, that's a waste of time. Surely we would never require that, right?
That's why I would focus on just residential
right.
areas.
Right. Even if it's resident next to a vacant lot, but let's not make people do things that.
But see right there, Commissioner. This is us operating in a vacuum. Whenever it's the, I don't know if this would be code enforcement or a building official or something, but when they get their checklist and they're as green as the day is long, they go out there and, you don't have a silt fence, shut down, boom, stop all construction. You're getting the call. I'm getting the call. You ain't getting the call. You ain't even getting the call. And it gets a little bit, it gets a little bit overbearing. So this is the only one that I have a sticking point on, and it's a great concept and a good conversation.
Yeah, and it's something that I want to keep on the radar, but that we can get to another time.
We don't want to turn LaBelle into Cape Coral.
No.
I don't want somebody to come in and tell me, hey, you can't do this is your property.
Yeah.
Personally, pine trees to me is a lightning rod. I don't have any on my property. I cleared my property.
Yeah.
And honestly, between all of us sitting here, someone would come out and say, you can't cut that tree and that tree and that tree. More than likely, it'd have been the first ones I cut.
Yeah.
So, we're living in Henry County here. We got people that, when they come in, they don't want to come in here with a checklist like you have in Bonita or you have in Cape Coral or you have in Fort Myers. That's why there's so many vacant lots in Cape Coral and Bonita and Fort Myers now. I think they come here for the fact that they can buy a piece of property and live the way they want to.
Right. And I agree.
That's the kind of problem I have with this issue that I have. So.
Well, and I appreciate your comment, but what you just said is that you don't want us to be Cape Coral, and if we let them clear cut all the properties around here, we'll become Cape Coral.
No, the man in Cape Coral put an amazing turf yard in, and they made him take it out because it wasn't real grass.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful.
And Ms. Emblich, I didn't even think about the lightning rod aspect, but the whole concept of those mature trees and the value and all that stuff. And you see, if you drive through the oldest neighborhoods in the city of Clewiston, there's not a lot of mature trees. And one of my best friends just cut down a cypress tree that I know is older than anybody, times 3 in this room, and I almost fought him. But this is one of those ones where it gets sticky quick.
Yeah.
I'm saying the same thing. So
understand.
thank you. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
When we get through everything, we'll see if we have time for comment.
The next item I have is the regulations for home occupations. That's been on the list for a while. It continues to be a hot point for us, and quite honestly, I already have some draft revised language that we could bring before you to consider after I take it to the LPA and such, but.
Well, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, what's a typical hot button item on this one? 3 minutes or less.
Well, it's somebody that it appears to be operating a commercial operation out of their home, and that has built a very large garage, and it appears that they might be storing some of their either vehicles and equipment for their business.
And you do get a fair amount of calls on this?
We get, well, that, and also the folks that are parking their trucking business on their properties as well.
Bet you don't get near as many calls as what's really going on. Just saying,
Okay.
there's a lot.
Yeah.
So people have become accustomed to it, it's there, and we know them.
Right.
People just don't
But
see it.
you can go down there and pick them all out. They know where they at.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is, they've been there 20 years or something.
That's right.
Yes.
Then you're gonna go back and try to change it.
Yeah, that'll be a tough one. Okay.
The last item I have has to do with creating a residential rental inspection program, which would help address the substandard housing. This is related to a couple of agenda items that we have on tonight, and it's something that I think we could reserve conversation on if you want to for those agenda items, but based on the efforts that staff and along with other agencies that we've been coordinating with over this past year regarding substandard rental properties, I think we've come to the conclusion that this is an opportunity that we can pursue, that the county can pursue, where we can make a difference. Otherwise, I think we're kind of stuck on what we really can do to make a dent into this issue. And having seen the Clewiston inspection program that they currently have and the revised one that they have, and the effectiveness that they've actually had in many ways, makes staff really think that this could be an opportunity. And of course, as you brought up earlier, it would require additional staff time, and the initial application of this, I'm getting into our agenda items. Is it okay? I don't know if it's okay, but if we were, if we were able to, now I forgot what I was going to say.
Have extra staff to do inspections.
Well, yeah, that. So
What else were you gonna say?
Well, what I was going to say is that I think that it would be very effective in addressing the situation of the substandard housing, and that we would be able to find ways to make it work for the county. And I'm going to leave it at that because I think we should wait until we get into the agenda items that we have on the board agenda, if you don't mind.
It's fine. I think we all understand.
I do not, but I'm gonna leave it alone too, because I wanted to help develop every tool that we can to put in y'all's toolbox, so that people that are preying on others with substandard housing are having to feel the effects, and the county feels, along with the health department, that we're all working on the same
Right.
sheet of music to stop this practice from occurring and being so prevalent. Because it proliferates itself. It puts a burden on our school system. It puts a burden on our emergency room. It puts a burden on everything. And I don't think we really grasp how bad it is.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And I guess to expand on where she was going with that, there's an agenda item in the regular book for the meeting that she feels like it's going to greatly take a chip out of this. that'd be a really good, mark into it, I believe is what she was
We'll
going.
have plenty of discussion
Right.
on those agenda items, but I'm happy to go
Not-
there now.
Not that
if
it's gonna be a
appropriate.
cure-all, but it's
Yeah,
gonna be a really good getting off the block point.
You did say Okeechobee has one?
No, the city of Colusa.
No,
See, yeah.
don't Okeechobee have one? Okeechobee
Okeechobee
County?
has one that they're working on
Oh,
currently.
okay.
Okeechobee and Hardy?
Hardy is working on one also. There's a new growing trend.
Cause you gotta come up with a money deal, how many times a year and what.
But we would
Oh, no.
definitely bring back some sort of fee structure for the permits like we discussed in our briefings earlier this week. The intention on this is, it's not to punish the good land, I don't want to use the word good, but the responsible landowners that take care of their properties, take care of their tenants in a meaningful way. What we're trying to do is create some sort of scenario where they can self-certify, they can go through the process and they can continue to operate in a responsible manner. We're trying to identify are the ones that are not being responsible, that we need to work with them to get them up to do stuff.
And I also think that we're gonna be shocked to find out how many of those there actually are, and the homestead exemption that is attached to those that is unlawfully attached to them.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yep, and
So it's more money coming out of the pockets of the county
exactly,
taxpayer.
yes, and this would help remedy that.
Yes, ma'am. But I think it's a great, I mean, you hear the county administrator say that we want to make it as less burdensome as possible on the good performers and engage in the poor performers. It's great. You know, I kind of opened the conversation this evening with you all. I had a number 11, which was, and I don't think we can actually add anything to this. I don't know if we can, but.
Oh, sure.
Okay, well, just, you creating a program that, that shows us, I don't know if it's a quarterly or biannual, but, level of code enforcement activity, and then lien activity, and then that foreclosure process, to see what that generates. I think that we've got to help facilitate something at our level of the discussion assemblage, so that you all are able to help facilitate people coming into a code compliant world. Not just, here's your fine, it goes on the books with said property, it never gets dealt with until someone dies, or someone sells, or, you know, some catastrophic event occurs. And even then, they have the option to come back to the Board of County Commissioners and asking for forgiveness that I've witnessed so many times, and we grant it to them. I think that if we can be more proactive on that process, we're going to engage the populace on wanting to come into a more code compliant world.
I will add that to the list, and I know we had a conversation earlier, and I think that this, the rental program, inspection program will help us with this as well. And I also, another aspect of what we would like to have the board consider, although we don't have it on our agenda discussion today, but we were planning on bringing it in the near future, is to look at a magistrate. And part of the reason is because of the successes that the city of Clewiston has had with their magistrate, and in addressing both the bad actors out there with code enforcement and with rental inspection issues.
Well, with the code inspection, is there a verbal warning first? Because I had a phone call the other day, but is there a verbal warning prior?
If code enforcement is able to see the property owner, when they see the issue, they will first try to talk to them. And if they can't, then we send a letter, and they also will come back around, and code enforcement will try to catch the owner if they can. But it's really hard sometimes to catch owners when they're home. And part of it is that, you know, we have certain hours of operation, but that's why they, code enforcement does monthly sweeps in different areas so that they have a better opportunity to interact with the community.
Well, let's say you talk to the owner and they did a follow through that Monday, will you still cite them?
If they do what on
Otherwise,
Monday?
once you spoke with the owner and they took care of the problem, are they still cited?
No.
They're not.
And we're not citing them, we're just sending a letter of investigation that highlights to them what regulations that they may be in violation of. So it's a very light approach with sending that letter to them. It's not a lien, it's not a fine. It only becomes to that point if they continue to ignore our letters and attempts for communication, and they don't remedy the situation.
Any other questions?
How many days is that take? From the time that conversation is initiated to now you've crossed the threshold and you're not being responsive? Is that 180 days?
Well, the first letter goes out, they have 30 days. The second letter is the letter of, it's the violation that they sent. And that is that 21 or 30?
The first one's actually 14.
All right, why don't you tell them?
The first notice they send out, mind you, it's been a while, so it's changed. But first notice they send out is a notice of investigation that they've either received a complaint or they've noticed something that's a possible violation. That will take 14 days to remedy. They give them at least 14 days to remedy, sometimes a little bit longer depending on what the violation is. Once they get no compliance, no cooperation, they send out a notice of investigation. That is usually giving them, I believe, 30 days. The notice violation.
Yeah.
So then, after the notice of violation, once they've received proof that they've received the notice of violation by getting the certified registered card back, and they've been ignored, then they go to the next steps. Sometimes they fix it. Sometimes they send the notice back. Then they have to post the property. Posting usually takes, I think, it's 10 days. So then, after those 10 days, they can issue a citation, which gives them 10 to 15 days to pay. They don't pay, then they can issue it to go before county judge. Judge makes the ruling.
That's 3 months.
So that's about, yes, roughly code enforcement takes about 3
And
months.
there's no way you can change the 30 to 14.
If I remember correctly, Florida statute on 162 changed where it used to say sufficient time, and it actually now gives a specific time.
What's the state statute?
So it's state statute.
Because we've got some of them out there, it's just on and on and on.
So what happens? 2 questions. What happens if the judge says no merit and he throws whatever case you brought before out?
Leave them alone.
Then we have to close the case.
And it's a moot point.
Yes, sir.
And whatever issue we were trying to get them to come in compliance with, they can basically say, holler at you later.
Correct.
But it can be brought up again.
Okay. What happens if you implement the special magistrate process? Does any of that time frame compress, number one, or does it just go to the special magistrate now instead of the judge?
There's a couple of efficiencies that can happen with a magistrate versus the judge. First one is that the magistrate would be under retainer by the county to do one specific function, which would be to hear these cases. Whereas with the judge, you're subject to the balancing of their docket. So it could be prolonged, it could be shortened, it could be changed, it just depends. So the judge you're a little bit at the mercy of the judiciary at that point. With the magistrate, you know the date is coming, you can streamline and cut the efficiency into play at that time.
How? Well, how many days? It sounds like you don't know, and you're
I
just
don't
saying
know
a
yet.
bunch of stuff.
We've not had the opportunity to run the analysis of how the magistrate is going to create the total for efficiencies. Now, right now, there's things that are before the statutes, but I don't know the Florida statute off the top of my head to be able to tell you all of the timeframes. But that's something I'm happy to take a look at and bring back to you. But with the magistrate itself, we could say that the date the magistrate is going to be here is every other month on this date. We're going to load up that docket for 8 hours and knock out as many cases as we possibly can.
Right. Debbie, do you want to
What's the
talk about
percent
the
thereof of a magistrate?
timeframe?
I mean, can we showcase history? Do you have the ability to show us? I really don't care. I just want to see, something to where we're having code enforcement. It goes back to the original concept of
That's okay.
code enforcement feeling as if they have support of us and the higher levels. I mean, you imagine sending out a code enforcement officer, the money they make, the duress that they're under, the villainization that they receive. They go through all that process, all that paperwork, to go before a judge on something that they legitimately feel convicted about, they were in the right to do. And the judge says, nah, you didn't dot an I, or whatever the judge may say. I don't know. Maybe it's very legitimate. I don't care.
Right.
But from what I've been expressed to understand is that there's a different way to go about this. So I'd love to know how we can compress it from a time frame standpoint, what the cost is going to be associated with on that special magistrate discussion, and then how that starts to play out.
Just to your question here, we have Debbie McNeil from the city of Clewiston that is prepared to speak to our agenda item that we have on later this evening, and she's also prepared to talk about how the magistrate system works for them and their process, which is something that we can look to help ours, improve ours as well. If the board wants to hear that conversation of how the magistrate works now, or it's up to you, or we can wait until the agenda item.
Yeah, we probably need to wait since it's already passed.
Okay,
Passed the
fine.
second time. Do we need any kind of official motion, or just let her, just give her direction to go?
No, I don't.
Anyone opposed to allowing her to continue the work and pursue the recommendations?
Well, Mary Douglas analysis you requested as well.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Very good job, Ms. Embridge, as you